Hello again, and this week I was recalling an article that I wrote for my Medium maybe 2 years ago, it must have been now. And in that article I recounted a time that I'd spent in India when I'd been up in the Himalayas for a couple of months, when I was there to do my 200-hour yoga teacher training. And I recounted a story that essentially when I was there, when I was involved in my training, I was waking up every day, doing long practices, lots of meditation, seeing the wonder and the majesty of the Himalayas every single morning from the shala windows. I was walking past Buddhist monasteries, I was spending time with beautiful teachers and spending time journaling and communing with nature and really doing everything that you might imagine that would help to bring us towards a more peaceful and balanced state. Anyhow, the story that I related was that having spent 2 months or so doing that and feeling really quite balanced and serene a lot of the time, I then needed to go to Delhi en route to somewhere else in the south of India. And when I got to Delhi, I realized that I needed to go and buy some items of clothing. And so I ended up in what we might call a modern air-conditioned Delhi mall. And to cut a long story short, essentially what happened was I went into a store, I spent some time collecting the items that I wanted, and then I went to queue to pay for the items, and having queued for what seemed like an inordinate amount of time, they rather unceremoniously shut the till that I was waiting for right as I was the next customer in line. So I rather begrudgingly went and stood at the end of another really long line of people to pay, and for whatever reason I just felt this energy building inside me, which soon had turned into anger. And before I knew it, I had essentially thrown the clothes somewhere and stormed out of the shop impatiently, deciding that I could not possibly wait another 5 minutes in order to pay for these clothes. It was quite amusing, even a few minutes later, to realise that there I was, having spent all this time, and I say that with air quote marks because in reality 2 months against a lifetime of behaving in a different way is not really a huge amount of time at all. But anyway, having felt rather good and pleased with myself for becoming this yogi in inverted commas, and then suddenly realising that actually I hadn't really made much progress at all, and all it took was the slightest coming together with the modern world and slightly not getting my way in the way that I wanted to it unfold, and before I knew it I'd had a mini meltdown and a mini tantrum. Now the reason that I raised this story is because this week what I wanted to offer were 3 tips or 3 suggestions, let us say, for how in the midst of our busyness and how in the midst of our tension and stressful lives, our tension-filled and stressful lives, how can we attempt to self-regulate, and how can we attempt to bring ourselves back to balance and from what we might often call from the brink of emotional or psychological overwhelm. And of course we know all too well, unfortunately, that when we are emotionally or psychologically overwhelmed, when we're moving too fast, when we don't take time to nourish and slow down, the result is that we essentially internally combust. Physiologically, our nervous system gets placed under a huge amount of strain, and then everything else cascades into our heart rate, our blood pressure, our digestion, our absorption capacity, and so much more. And that's just internally. And then, of course, externally, whoever happens to be closest to us, both physically or psychologically, tends to then also bear the brunt of our overwhelm. So the question that we really need to be asking ourselves, I guess it's in 2 parts, is the first one is, why are we so often overwhelmed? And number 2, when we are overwhelmed or when we notice that we're moving towards overwhelm, what on earth do we do about it? Now, from a yoga perspective, the reason that we are so overwhelmed is because we are stuck in our patterns. We've been conditioned, as we know, over many, many decades to behave and to act in the world in a certain way. And that means that we've absorbed very deeply into our minds certain behaviours. And as a result of living in a world where essentially we expect instant gratification, and as a result of living in a world where we are so focused on fulfilling our external desires, whether those desire systems are valid or not, we have essentially created patterns that help us, in inverted commas, to gain instant gratification, and also that have created quite strong bonds of attachment to the way in which we live, to the things that we expect to have in our lives, and for the way that we really expect our days and circumstances to unfold. The momentum and the intensity with which we pursue those goals, and the momentum and intensity with which we pursue our desires, means that we become wrapped into this fast-paced momentum or way of living, which leaves very little space for us to be able to even notice when we're being triggered, and all of the accompanying associations or sensations, I should say, within the body. And as a result of that, before we know it, we are constantly living on the brink of explosion, or constantly living on the brink of overwhelm. If we're always moving at pace, if we're never allowing ourselves a moment to take our foot off the pedal, to release the pressure, then it is unsurprising that every time pressure rises, we fall back into that same pattern of emotional overwhelm, and then of course the fireworks that accompany that, whether it be tears, whether it be anger, whether it be raising our voice, whether it being impatient with the people around us, and as we said before, causing damage to ourselves and causing damage to those around us. Now, one of the challenges is that because our minds have become so projected out into the world, we're constantly thinking, we're constantly looking around, we're being goaded by our senses into attachment with the external world and external stimuli, that we've really lost connection to what is actually being felt as an inner experience in each and every moment. Now, yoga is the practice at a certain level of deepening or reconnecting to our inner experience, noticing what that inner experience is in any moment of time, and over a period of time with our practice, being able to shape and adjust that inner feeling so that it becomes more beneficial meaning, more stable, more calm, more peaceful, more balanced, etc., more equanimity within our minds, within our bodies, and so forth. Now, the combination of not being connected to our inner sensations and the fact that we are living at pace means that we get ramped up into these overwhelmed states very, very quickly without noticing it. And as a result of that, by the time we are overwhelmed, it's already too late. We've missed all of the triggers and all the signals that say that we're ramping up into this state, and we become hijacked by that emotion. We become hijacked by those sensations, and they just play out on autoplay, essentially. The trick with yoga practice is to become more and more attuned to this inner state and to the way that sensations start quite subtly before they build up into what we might call volcano formation. So if we become more aware and we notice those sensations earlier and earlier on, and in addition to that, we have tools and methods and techniques to bring ourselves out of those early triggered states, we are not only much more likely to be more in balance more of the time, but we are less likely to reach peak volcano mode, where we are literally captured or hijacked by these strong emotions. So here are 3 suggestions for things that we can do in our day-to-day lives on a regular basis each day to bring ourselves back from the brink of emotional overwhelm. The first thing we can do is what we can call a check-in. It is simply an opportunity to be still, to bring our attention inwards and to start with the body, just to begin noticing internally the way the body feels. We let go of the movement of the mind externally. We bring our attention onto our sensations, we absorb in those sensations, and we just notice how those sensations are presenting themselves to us. This will give us key insight into how we're feeling in any moment of time. The second step of this first suggestion is then to bring our attention onto the breath. In the same way we observe the breath, we notice how it's feeling, we notice what the sensations accompanying the breath are in that moment of time. And this too also gives us insight into where we are and how we're feeling. And then finally, as part of this check-in, we notice the mind, we watch over the mind, we notice the thoughts that are rising. And of course, this too will give us a huge amount of insight into how we're feeling in any given moment and what's really going on in our minds. And as a result of that, and as a result of overlooking those or looking over those three aspects of ourselves, we may find at the end of that short practice, we feel a little bit more balanced, we feel a little bit more connected to how we're feeling, and therefore more capable of moving forward into the next part of our day or the next activity. The second thing we can do is simply to take a pause. Whatever we're doing, whether it's arriving in the office, whether it's arriving home, arriving at a shop, whether it's finishing a call, whether it's finishing a discussion, just to begin to introduce and integrate a practice of just taking a pause. It can be 15 or 20 seconds where we literally sit in front of our computer, take a moment, be still, let go of thought, a feeling of clearing out whatever it is that we've just done, not dwelling, not thinking about the future, maybe just looking around the room, taking in what's around us, noticing our breath, but just pausing whatever we are doing and just allowing things to settle. The third and final suggestion is that we can just take occasionally throughout the day some long, slow breaths, maybe 6 or 12 breaths, where we just sit still. We can sit on the ground, we can sit on a chair, we can do it standing, we can be on a bus, we can be in a car, we can be on the underground, a plane, an airport, an office, whatever it might be. And the intention in that moment is to slow the breath down, to focus on the breath, notice a comfortable expansive inhale, notice a nice releasing exhale, and do this 6 to 12 times and notice how we feel afterwards. If we can bring those three suggestions or similar into our lives on a regular basis, we will no doubt feel a difference in our day-to-day experience. And as a result of that, hopefully with practice sustainably over time, we will notice that we are finding ourselves on the brink of emotional and mental overwhelm far, far less often. And as a result of that, we will feel better internally. And as a result of that, of course, we will interact with those around us in a more balanced and calm and stable way. So as always, I hope you found that useful, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.